Alex, so for some reason my camera isn't working this week. I forgot to charge it. So this video is brought to you courtesy of my shitty webcam. So this week I'm going to be reviewing Pride and Prejudice as punishment for finishing my Lesser Blessed video late. Now, you didn't assign this book as a punishment because you hated Jane Austen, but because you thought it was really upsetting that I'm a female English major and have not read a single Jane Austen book. I'm sorry, did you just say you hated Jane Austen, Alex? Now that I think about it, Pride and Prejudice might not be your type of Jane Austen book, but don't worry, there's one for everybody. I mean, yours might be Northanger Abbey or Mansfield Park. I think mine's Mansfield Park. Oh, okay, that's nice, but I didn't say... If you don't like Jane Austen, we can't be friends anymore. What? Jane Austen is serious business. I think I liked you better when you just wore a hat. Yeah, me too. I really can't see what I'm doing right now. Anyways, Pride and Prejudice is one of those books where the plot is so well known it feels ridiculous to try and summarize, but I'm going to do so anyway. It's the story of Elizabeth Bennet and her relationship with Mr. Darcy. Elizabeth is the second oldest of 5 sisters, and their mother is desperate to get them married off because they don't have any claim to their father's land once he dies. The novel begins when eligible bachelor Mr. Bingley moves into the nearby estate. Elizabeth and her older sister Jane go to various parties in the hopes of one of them attracting his attention and eventually getting to marry him. While they're there, they meet his brooding friend, the mysterious Mr. Darcy. I find it incredibly amusing that all the women find Darcy ill-tempered and unsuitable as a husband because he sits alone and doesn't make conversation and basically just acts aloof and grumpy all the time, whereas nowadays the whole dark and brooding thing would get him a line of fangirls a mile long. I mean, how did we go from, he danced with me all evening, hardly said a word to the other girls, he's so much nicer than the horrible brooding man in the corner who hardly even said hello when I introduced myself, to, that guy in biology acted so weird. I mean, everyone else had been asking me out, but he didn't say a word to me and acted like my physical presence repulsed him. Wonder who he is. Eventually, Jane falls in love with Mr. Bingley, while Elizabeth falls in severe dislike with Mr. Darcy. This is helped when she meets Mr. Wickham, a man who she greatly admires and who tells her that Mr. Darcy has been a horrible person to him his entire life, basically cheating him out of money he's owed and his father's will and blah blah, something like that. Eventually Jane is crushed when Mr. Bingley, his sisters, and Mr. Darcy go back to London with no word at all. She tries writing to them but doesn't really get a good reply. His sisters just kind of brush her off. The next spring, Elizabeth goes to visit her friend Charlotte, who it turns out lives next door to Darcy's aunt, Lady Catherine. Elizabeth spends more time with Darcy and with his cousin, Colonel Fitzwilliam, and she's being her usual snarky self, making fun of Darcy, having all this witty conversation. When then eventually she finds out that Darcy prides himself on being responsible for getting Bingley to move away from Jane and breaking up their relationship. And shortly after this, Darcy stops by and tells Elizabeth that he's in love with her and asks her to marry him. That's good timing for you. Elizabeth, who was completely unaware that Darcy was attracted to her, kinda shuts him down. The conversation goes something like this. In vain I have struggled. It will not do. My feelings will not be repressed. You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, I kind of wish I didn't because your family's kind of embarrassing, but I do love you. Will you marry me? No. Why not? Because you suck. And why are you wearing sunglasses? We're indoors. I'm pretty sure they haven't been invented yet. Because I'm cool. If only the person making this video had more creativity than that. So, yeah, Liz tears him down, tells him that he knows what he did to Jane and everything that Mr. Wickham told him. So Darcy kind of sulks off. The next day, he shows up and gives her a letter. In person, don't they have a postal service for that kind of thing? Or like, owls? That explains his side of the story. It turns out he's really not such a bad guy, and Mr. Wickham is kind of a jerk. Elizabeth starts to realize that maybe her first impression of Darcy was wrong. A couple months later, she and her aunt and uncle, while on a tour of all these fancy estates, end up at Darcy's childhood home, where everyone has nothing but good things to say about him. Darcy then shows up himself, and Elizabeth starts to realize that maybe she kinda has a thing for him. Several UST-laden conversations later, Elizabeth receives word that her younger sister Lydia, who is only 15, has run away with Mr. Wickham, and he doesn't plan to marry her. After a whole lot of freaking out on the family's behalf, they're found, and it turns out that they are getting married. Whew, that was a scary couple of chapters. It turns out that Darcy was responsible for tracking them down and getting them married, and he did all this out of a favor to Elizabeth, who he is still in love with. Eventually, they meet up, they have one last conversation, there are confessions of love all around, and everyone lives happily ever after. So, Alex, you can rest easy. I did like this book. Told ya. Score 1 for Jane Austen. Yeah. Well, it is a good book. It's probably better than I expected. I mean, you hear so much about Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy as, like, the ultimate couple that I was kind of expecting, like, sunshine and sparkles and butterfly romance. And it's not. It's a realistic relationship that changes believably over time. And I kind of love how Elizabeth spends the first half of the novel hating Darcy even though we know they're going to end up together. And it's like a real hate, too, not the kind that just barely covers a seething passion underneath. And I love how the conflict between the characters comes from actual character traits rather than contrived misunderstandings. The characters actually communicate with each other. There was never a moment when I felt like if they both sat down in the same room and talked things out, then they would be on each other in a minute. I mean, yeah, Liz's initial opinion is informed by a misunderstanding, but even after Darcy explains everything, it takes her a while to warm up to him. And even though the whole, here is a lengthy letter that explains everything I felt and why I did everything does kind of seem like a plot convenience designed to wrap everything up, it wasn't. It made, like, perfect sense. That's what somebody would do in that situation. I guess what I'm trying to say is thank you, fictional characters. Thank you so much for communicating like adults. There were still a couple things that bugged me. For one thing, none of the letters have paragraphs. That seems like it should be such a small thing, but seriously, after, like, flipping through page after page after page of block of text, I was just kind of skimming, and the letters are kind of crucial. And the reappearance of Lady Catherine at the end of the novel kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, she basically shows up for one chapter to tell Liz that Darcy can't marry her, that he's supposed to marry her daughter. Oh, I love you, books from days of yore with your casual supporting of incest. And it's this stupid artificial conflict. I mean, the main problem between Elizabeth and Darcy wasn't that outside forces were keeping them apart, it's that they were keeping themselves apart. Although it did give Liz a chance to tell her off and be snarky again, and I'm always in favor of snark. And the dialogue is definitely the strongest part. I mean, everyone is incredibly witty and it's great to read. But the weird thing is that during both key emotional moments in the book, Austen doesn't deliver the monologues that her characters are. She just drops out and tells what they're saying instead of just have them say it. Both Darcy's first proposal and his second one, when Elizabeth tells him that she loves him as well, are told from a third-person perspective instead of having them just actually say it. It's weird. Although I guess I should be thankful that Austen saved the world and not their couple quotes about love, which, though eloquent, would be taken out of context by obnoxious 14-year-olds and quoted in Facebook statuses everywhere. Although it would take some of the heat off of Shakespeare and Emily Bronte. But overall, this is still a good book, and I am kind of ashamed that I haven't read it or anything else by Jane Austen sooner. How did you even manage that anyway? I don't know, I just never got around to it. I mean, I've read Bridget Jones' Diary, I've seen Clueless. Clueless is based on Emma. Aren't they all kind of the same? Okay, that does it. We're not friends anymore. Give me my book back. It's okay, I'm just kidding. Don't hurt me. Anyways, good book, good romance. I'll give it 4 Elegant Society parties out of 5. Alex, I'll see you next week when we will be officially done exams and you will be in Oakville reviewing, to quote your MSN conversation, and going postal, I guess. Bye! For those of you who don't know, today and tomorrow is the 2010 Project for Awesome, where users attempt to take over the front page of YouTube with videos showcasing various charities in the interest of goodwill and the spirit of the holidays and whatnot. We don't have a Project for Awesome video because we here at Wearing Blue Stockings hate charity. Actually, we've just been very busy, very poor, and very forgetful. But we and you can still help out by going to youtube.com/P4A and subscribing. You can then comment on all the videos, watch some cool stuff. It doesn't take a lot of effort. And for one day a year, the front page of YouTube will be something besides Shane Dawson videos, double rainbows, and cat videos. And donate to something if you can. I mean, just because we hate charity doesn't mean you should. In fact, you probably shouldn't.